Hi, greetings everyone. Welcome. Welcome to the Center for Brooklyn History. My name is Marcia Eli. It's my pleasure to greet you on behalf of my colleagues here at the center and at the Brooklyn Public Library, which we are part of, and the Arts and Culture team at the library, BPL Presents. Tonight's program is the next in our series titled Just Conversations, co-presented by the Center for Brooklyn History and Brooklyn.org. This evening, we also are collaborating with Documented, the non-profit news site that provides such vital information about immigrants and their immigration and its impact on our city and communities. Documented's signature newsletter, Early Arrival, is a must-read for anyone concerned about immigration in New York. I want to thank everyone at Documented on the team for all you've done to make this program happen, and especially board member Rachel Strom. So, tonight we welcome 4 leading voices on the front lines of immigration advocacy, policy, journalism, and humanitarian response. I'll mention that this is part 2 of our Just Conversations about Immigration. The first looked at what we refer to as our country's welcome myth and the contradiction between that story that we tell ourselves and our very alarming reality. You, by the way, can view that program if you want to. It was recorded, and it's worth seeing. It's on the Center for Brooklyn History Public Programs YouTube playlist, and I'm happy to share that link with anybody who's interested. It's really been a joy to work with the Brooklyn.org team on these 2 events. And now it's my pleasure to introduce Sabrina Hargrave, VP of Programs at Brooklyn.org, to say a few words. Sabrina.
Hi, everybody. How y'all doing? Hello. Thank you. Okay. Thank you, Marcia, and thank you to the entire Center for Brooklyn History team. To quote a panelist tonight, things are bad, things are sad, right? But today, you're lucky to be here with the people that are doing something about it, so thank you for the very special night ahead. Who is Brooklyn.org? Why am I here, right? So Brooklyn.org is so grateful and honored to be in partnership with you for Just Conversations. And for the whole team here, the goal is to elevate critical issues of racial, social, and economic justice through the stories and insights of the local change makers doing the work firsthand. Being able to bring this panel together with our friends at Documented is especially important to us because we were one of their first funders, maybe the second. I can't claim the first, even though I want to. All the way in 2019. If you are not familiar with Documented, subscribe so you can know everything that's going on that's impacting immigrants on a daily basis. And they've just flourished. So at Brooklyn.org, we have a front row seat to the challenges facing our communities, as well as the brilliance of our borough through our work with nonprofits. Brooklyn is not only the cultural capital of New York City, thank you all for traveling from Manhattan and beyond. It is also the center of innovation and home to nonprofit changemakers, right? Our friend Murad was born here, maybe a few others around the room. Welcome home. And that's why Brooklyn.org exists. We are a partner and platform for mobilizing change, bringing together everyone who loves Brooklyn to harness our collective generosity and creativity. We're here to match needs with resources and struggles in our borough with solutions. If after today's programs you are so called to think about what you want to do next, I encourage you to head over to brooklyn.org, very easy to remember, to see how you can support Brooklyn's nonprofit sector. And without the Brooklyn that we all know and love would not exist without immigrants. You know, raise of hands, how many of our panelists today are from immigrant families or immigrants themselves? What's up? I wouldn't be here. Many of us in the room would not be here, right? Brooklyn is immigrants. Not only is 1/3 of Brooklyn immigrants, our borough is home to approximately 25% of New York City's undocumented residents. I will not ask you to raise your hand. In recent months, we have seen heightened restrictions on immigration across the nation and the consequences here in New York City. This evening, we will gain insights on what our immigrant neighbors are facing right now, a sense of what's to come, and how these amazing people are working towards that. Thank you for being here to learn alongside us as we gain a deeper understanding and understand what role we can play in that. We invite you to join Brooklyn Org at upcoming events to learn more about the ripple effects of federal policy. This Thursday, we have a great webinar on the market and community update to really understand how the administration's impacts on financial markets and the lives of everyday Brooklynites. You can learn more about and RSVP at brooklyn.org/events. Thank you for coming out tonight and hearing from these amazing change makers. Thank you, Marsha.
Thank you, Sabrina. So following the moderated conversation tonight, we're going to turn to your questions. Our ushers have offered you pencils and index cards. Please write your questions down, and they'll be coming through the aisles to collect them throughout the program. And we hope you'll join for a nibble and some beverages, and to continue the conversation following the event in the room in the front there. So now it is really my great honor to tell you a bit about each of tonight's esteemed guests. Omar Jadwat, director of the ACLU's Immigrants Rights Project, has led landmark litigation to defend immigrant rights nationwide. The Immigrants Rights Project's long list of groundbreaking cases includes litigation that successfully establishes limits on immigration detention, preserving judicial review and other key due process rights, preventing state and local police from taking immigration enforcement into their own hands, and ending the first Trump administration's family separation policy. Hans van der Weerd is Senior Vice President for Resettlement, Asylum, and Integration at the International Rescue Committee. He oversees programs supporting refugees and asylum seekers in the United States and Europe. The Resettlement, Asylum, and Integration program creates opportunities for refugees and other vulnerable migrants to survive and thrive in the United States and Europe, serving over 668,000 clients across the network in 2023. Murad Awawdeh is president and CEO of the New York Immigration Coalition, where he has led electoral, legislative, and policy campaigns at the federal, state, and local levels, mobilized hundreds of thousands of New Yorkers at demonstrations against anti-immigrant policies, and successfully led grassroots electoral campaigns to elect progressive candidates. And our moderator tonight, journalist Ethar El-Katatney, is editor-in-chief of Documented. Ethar has received a CNN African Journalist of the Year Award, the Samir Kasser Freedom of the Press Award, and an Anna Lind Euro-Mediterranean Journalist Award. She is an entrepreneur in residence at the Brown Institute for Media Innovation and sits on the board of the Online News Association. It's an extraordinary group of people whose heads are being put together in this conversation tonight. I really, again, am so honored to have you all in this space. Please help me welcome our panelists to the stage.
So much water. Okay, good evening, everyone. Thank you for being here. I'm the editor-in-chief at Documented. It's so wonderful. Thank you all for coming out tonight. And I know, kind of looking at the RSVP list, so many of you are advocates, lawyers, organizers, neighbors coming out here. I apologize, giving you my back. So across the country, we're living through a pivotal moment in immigration. The landscape is shifting rapidly and often chaotically. Families ask themselves, when I leave my home, can I come back? Federal crackdowns, shifting policies, and state-level restrictions are creating confusion and fear. And yet here in New York, communities are also organizing, resisting, and finding ways to move forward. I'm so happy to be with all of you today. We're going to talk about what lives look like right now for immigrant New Yorkers, what could still be coming, and most importantly, how impacted communities are showing agency and how all of us can help. So let's dive right in. To start, I want us to ground the conversation in what life looks like on the ground right now for immigrant New Yorkers and how organizations are responding. Omar, let's start with you. You've been in the middle of some major litigation to defend immigrant rights. Can you share some examples with us to capture how policies are playing out on the ground and what strategies you and your partners are using?
Sure. I mean, one thing I think that we're seeing a lot of here in New York is an incredibly sort of cynical move by the immigration authorities to arrest people at courthouses. So people who have been in immigration proceedings, who have been showing up to their hearings, who come for another in a long series, sometimes years-long series of appearances, then find themselves arrested in the hallway outside or in the elevator outside of their hearing. This is obviously devastating for the people involved and their families, and not coincidentally has the effect of scaring other people from going to their hearings, and therefore creates more undocumented people, more people who are then in violation of what they're supposed to be doing. One angle here for us, especially in the sort of on the legal side of the house, is to attack the policies that underlie this kind of effort as illegal in various ways. And so together with the New York Civil Liberties Union and a bunch of other partners, we've brought lawsuits challenging the expansion of expedited removal, the fact that they take folks who were in these regular removal proceedings and are now trying to put them in abbreviated summary proceedings where they'll have much less of a chance to state their case, challenging the courthouse arrest policy itself, challenging the sort of dismissal of cases in order to put people in these proceedings, challenging the sort of indefinite detention or of folks who are subject to it. There's a whole lot of pieces of the legal puzzle that are now in litigation in the courts. Some of these we've managed to get suspended. Others, unfortunately, we haven't been able to yet, but we continue to try to. And the goal really is to try to, get in the way of this effort, which is, just one here in New York, I think a really big part of what's going on. Obviously not the whole of it.
We get a lot of questions. One of the biggest things that documented in the last few months has been obviously about going to the courts and kind of the fear that immigrants in New York City are kind of in being able to navigate their lives. So going to the courts, people trying to scam them, right, using their kind of fear to be like, you can come online, we'll do the Zoom courts for you. So it's wonderful to hear about what's going on. Thank you. Hans, you work directly with seekers, asylum seekers, and refugees. Can you tell us a little bit about what life looks like right now for the families that you work with?
Yeah, I think, first to reinforce what Omar said, I mean, the fear and the fact that people are incredibly scared, I think, is what we see in New York, but also in the 30 cities across the United States where we are working. I think under the previous administration, the clients that we work with had basically two important priorities: employment authorization, so they could start make a living, and housing. And because of the lack of coordination between the Biden administration and the city government, that was a problem, and we needed to do a lot of coordination. But now there is the added situation of deportations, detention, and something that we don't talk enough about also is family separation. We see families being ripped apart, parents being arrested, little kids in court. I mean, just 2 weeks ago, we had a little 9-year-old girl. She was the victim of domestic and sexual abuse, separated from her mother, alone in a court initially. And ICE was ready to deport this girl. Fortunately, there was legal support, and so that deportation was not happening. But I think in this climate, there's a lot of fear. There's a lot of room also for misinformation. The misinformation that sort of like is happening at the moment in social media, it's rampant, and it's basically also, causing people to make bad choices as well. So I think, our work is very much focused with partners on making sure that people have the right information so that they have agency to make the right choices, making sure that basic assistance that people need is also taken care of. Because the other big sort of like concern that we are really worried about is that in this big, beautiful bill, the eligibility to access simple benefits as Medicaid or food assistance is being taken away from anyone who is not a green card holder. And people know that, so they're very concerned. So yeah, the situation is quite grim at the moment.
Can you talk a little bit to these partnerships with organizations? What does that look like on the ground?
Well, for example, with Documented, we have an amazing partnership where we basically try to create a database of information online that is on the one hand generated by external resources, but also sourced by the immigrants themselves that they can access so that they have the right information. With another great partner, Africana, we support through mobile case management services the provision of basic humanitarian assistance, access to food, access to housing, referrals to legal providers, to the community. I mean, we are an international humanitarian organization. We couldn't do anything. We couldn't serve our clients with the help of local partners like some of the ones that I mentioned in the legal space. There is a wonderful organization called VIA or Co-Counsel that really helps us provide legal services to our clients as well. And we need much more of that in the years to come, I'm afraid.
I didn't tee him up for that, right? Just to say. But I will add on to that definitely, so one thing we do very differently is our community-driven journalism model. So actually connecting directly with immigrants themselves. We talk to them in 4 languages: English, Chinese, Spanish, and Haitian Creole. So our community correspondents are constantly, daily getting dozens of questions. And we use those questions to build those guides, right? So, and before, let's say they would be things also obviously around immigration, but also things around labor, your home, renting. But in the last few months, we've built guides around, how to move your court hearing online, right, in response to people asking questions, but also things what to do if you're a parent and you're afraid of getting deported, right, how to prepare your children. So actionable service guides that are directly curated from the questions that immigrants themselves are sending us. And I'd add also, I think here, that the fear that you both have mentioned is really what we're also seeing on the ground in terms of how immigrants are changing their habits, right? Picking up their kids up from school, going to hospitals, not wanting to go to the doctor. That was another guide, right? What can my doctor share? Can they share information about me to ICE? not wanting to go to places of worship, right? So not wanting to go to restaurants, so that also affects local businesses. So the fear, whether it's of actual policies or even perceived impact, is really affecting New York City. Murad, moving to you. You obviously connect with hundreds of local organizations. Tell us a little bit about what reality looks like on your side.
Sure. First, thank you guys for having us. My name is Murad Awawdeh. I'm the president and CEO of the New York Immigration Coalition. The New York Immigration Coalition is one of the oldest and largest immigrant rights organizations in the U.S. We have over 200 members across the state of New York, with the vast majority of them here in the city of New York. It's been, I said this earlier, I don't know who I said this to, but they're here. Today felt like a really long year. And that's what the past 8 months have felt like. We are in a moment of crisis that every previous administration has helped build. And I say that not trying to sound partisan in any way, but it's the reality that we live in. For over 30 plus years, there has been no real effort to address our broken immigration system. So if we continue to try to put, Band-Aids on, I shouldn't use that other term. If we keep trying look at ways that we can just Band-Aid an issue, it's not going to really work. It's going to continue to build. And what we are seeing is the culmination of that. The past several years here, even in New York City, have been a challenge. We went through the first Trump administration, which was really bad against our community members, and then COVID happened. And we lost an enormous amount of human capital that was able to help power us through that moment. And then we continued to try to build, but even under Biden, we were fighting. And we were fighting for the same livelihoods that we were dealing with today. So what we are seeing with now under this new administration over the past almost, 9 months, has been a relentless war against our communities. And I don't use that word lightly. Every single day there is a new policy, a new action, a new executive order, or several on the same exact day attacking immigrants. And the narrative that the Trump administration has been using is, these are the people who are taking. They don't give anything to society. And by the way, they're the most violent individuals in the world. None of that is true. And our communities actually make communities safer. Our communities are the economic engine of places like New York City, where nearly half of all small businesses are owned by immigrants, where 1 in 4 individuals in the state of New York are foreign born. New York would not be New York without immigrant New York. And for the past 9 months, we have been seeing the Trump administration continue to ratchet up their rhetoric into action against immigrant New Yorkers day in and day out. So what does that look like? It looks like every single policy that is only its real impact is to sow chaos, panic, and fear, to lie to the American people and say that this is specifically for your safety and security when we know that it's about cruelty, and that's their point. Omar mentioned about the courts, right? And no one historically has seen the courts be weaponized in the way that we have over the past several months. And we started to raise the flag in May when randomly judges were just dismissing people's cases at master hearings, which is not something we had seen before, at the urging of ICE. So we saw heightened enforcement happening outside of the city of New York and then coming to the city of New York immediately after inauguration. We continue to see them actually not be successful in as much enforcement as they were doing here in the city because people knew what their rights were. And if you don't know what your rights are, you should learn them because it's as important as it is to someone who is not a U.S. citizen as it is to a U.S. citizen. And then we started seeing them pretty much tricking and trapping people to come to court and then detaining and disappearing them. And that is an everyday thing at this point. Many people are making this very difficult choice. Do I go to court or do I not? Because if I go to court, there's a good chance that they're going to detain me, even if I have all my papers in, everything's moving forward. Or do I not go to court? They can't take me that day. And then I risk, potential enforcement down the road. These are not decisions people should be having to make. There's often this narrative of like, do it the right way. There is no real right way, first. But second, if there were a right way to those individuals' comment, it is this. People are going to court. They have filed their immigration relief applications. They are going through the process. They are following every single step the government has told them to do. And even with that, they're being disappeared. So I think in this moment, immigrant New Yorkers are incredibly fearful, but also we have to all be incredibly hopeful at the same time, because the opposite of fear is hope. And I think that is the only way we're going to be able to get through these moments, because if we continue to live in this moment of fear, we ourselves will not make it out. So I've seen what hope can do. I've seen people who were taken, and through incredible legal action and incredible advocacy and strategy, we've been able to free families. We've been able to get people back out of the system. And that is the fight we all have to be committed to. And there's a role for every single person to play in that moment. And I think that what this administration is banking on is that people won't take action. And the last thing I'll say before I kick it back is this is just an experiment to see how far they can get away with taking away someone's rights in this country. And if they're doing it to immigrants right now as a test subject, guess who they're coming after next? And we just saw that you'll see it this Wednesday in Congress, where Representative Mast has introduced a bill to pretty much penalize U.S. citizens for their un-American views. And who defines what un-American views are? Mast or Marco Rubio? Let's be honest with ourselves. This is another way that they are trying to undermine our democracy, to strip people of their rights so that we move further and further into authoritarianism.
Thank you. You've laid out a really clear picture. Can you tell us a little bit about some of the strategies you're personally kind of involved in the organization to deal with what's going on?
Yeah. So we've been working with a number of different organizations and our members across the city of New York. I see our good friends at Immigrant Defense Project here. We've been coordinating even before this administration came in, and really trying to figure out what are some strategies that we can all be learning from each other, because there's not one playbook to learn, there are multiple. So in this moment, we are organizing in different spaces together as institutions, but we're also working together with non-traditional partners, right? So being able to work with the Professional Staff Congress, which is mostly a union of professors, adjunct professors, and university workers who have partnered with us, as well as with JFREJ, which is Jews for Economic and Racial Justice, a few different mutual aid groups, and others to actually do the court watch and accompaniment, right? We're also working with the vast majority of our members right now across the city of New York to really educate our bases, but also to make sure that businesses know what their rights are, that individuals know what their rights are. So the court watch is one thing, and trying to provide and coordinate rapid response legal services is one thing, which we're using a larger network of legal service providers to do. And just as, to be transparent with everyone, there has been no real support coming in to support this work. And when I say support, there has been no real resources invested to really meet the moment we're finding ourselves in. So everyone who was quadruple at capacity during COVID, who then continued to be quadruple at capacity under the past 4 years, are now 10 times at capacity now and still pushing forward. So people are doing and going above and beyond, and we're trying to make sure that we're working with everyone to be able to deliver the most highest quality services that we can to our communities in the best and quickest way possible, because time is of the essence in a lot of these cases where people are being taken, and the Trump administration's goal is just to deport as many people as possible or have them languish in detention. And the further they get away from their family and their community and their legal supports, the harder it is for them. And that is part of their plan, is to make life as unbearable as possible. Either you self-deport, or we're going to leave you in detention for however long we want to.
And we actually get a lot of questions about self-deportation when we featured a number of stories on people, how do I self-deport, and how do I do that? think your line, how we were all doing more with a lot less, kind of everybody working in this space right now really hits home and resonates. Yeah, so kind of looking ahead now, policies and enforcement we've seen so far in different states may just be the beginning. I'd like us to talk a little bit about some of the scenarios that could unfold and how New York might respond differently. So, Omar, let's start with you. We're hearing obviously rumors, possible crackdowns. Legally, what's on the horizon? Can federal enforcement escalate? And what does that look like in practice?
Yeah, so this is I don't know if the first part of the panel was so bright, but this is darker.
Taking out you on a journey.
Yeah, exactly. You know, you can look around the country and see in some other cities what's been happening, right? So you see in Los Angeles, I think, you know, an example of first extremely aggressive federal enforcement, you know, using CBP, folks who ordinarily would be policing the border, as well as a big deployment of ICE personnel, you know, profiling people and taking them off the streets, out of workplaces and different ways, you know, really laying siege to the city of Los Angeles, or at least to certain communities within the city. You know, that's one model we've seen. We've also, in Los Angeles, seen the kind of follow-on deployment of actual troops, both military troops and National Guard troops. Those are both things that, you know, the administration has promised to bring to other cities around the country. It's interesting and I think significant that the administration had threatened to deploy National Guard units from other states to Chicago to try to sort of ramp up enforcement there. And they're definitely doing more enforcement in Chicago, but they have, for now, reversed that plan on the National Guard, right? And they're saying, oh, we're only going to deploy the National Guard in states where, well, that kind of deployment isn't going to happen in Chicago right now. It's going to happen in places like Memphis instead, where the governor is a Republican. And that's a significant reversal, right? And I think, you know, the fact that we're in New York suggests that we have more to worry about in terms of, for now, in terms of, you know, seeing more federal agents deployed to the city and perhaps less of a concern about National Guard coming here right now. And so, you know, but that's a significant thing to worry about. Certainly the kind of enforcement, you know, what I keep thinking of as a siege, that sort of enforcement effort that they've been doing in Los Angeles, if brought here, you know, would be awful. As you may have known, like, we have actually succeeded in challenging various aspects of the Los Angeles siege, including their targeting of journalists as part of that effort. But the Supreme Court has, you know, put on hold our TRO that would have prevented profiling basically on a combination of Latino ethnicity plus working in a low-wage job, which is, you know, doesn't mean we're not going to keep fighting that, and doesn't mean that it's okay elsewhere. Certainly doesn't even mean that it's okay in LA. But that obviously, you know, complicates the fight going forward.
You touched on it a little bit, but can you talk a little bit more about how lawsuits and legal strategies actually make a difference? There's so much conversation, you know, things going back and forth.
Yeah, I mean, you know, the best way they can make, not the best, the cleanest way they can make a difference is, you know, you win a case and you keep it won, even though there's, you know, the Supreme Court there. and that stops the government from doing something bad. And so, I think the one example of that is the Alien Enemies Act, right? The government decided to use this wartime authority that dates all the way back to the 18th century, and declare that we were being invaded by a gang, by a Venezuelan gang, and use that as a way to deport Venezuelan men with no process whatsoever and actually send them to, an infamous torture prison in El Salvador. There has been a lot of litigation over that. The litigation is not over, but because of that litigation, nobody beyond that initial set of people have been sent out of the country under the Alien Enemies Act. And I think more significantly, the government hasn't been able to roll this out to other gangs from other countries, right, and replicate that strategy to kind of eviscerate due process for more and more groups of people. I mean, not to say they're not doing other things to eviscerate due process in different ways, but that's an example of sort of how the litigation can directly prevent them from doing something illegal and bad. And then there's lots of ways, I think, in which even if you don't achieve a complete win, or even if you have a win that doesn't last forever, bringing these legal challenges can help, number one, to put the government on notice, to expose what's going on, to get people to understand broadly what's going on. And I think that, there's no question, right? There was no question, because of the work that the legal team did gathering facts in the LA case. The government didn't even say, there's no proof that we're profiling, right? The government had to, and the Supreme Court at least ultimately had to confront the question, is this okay? We wish the answer at this point had been more clearly no, but I think that we will, eventually get there. And those are the cases that take longer and the issues that take longer to work.
Hopefully, eventually. Hans, obviously IRC is a national organization. You work a little bit more at state and local levels, and we've spoken about the role of how state and local governments can close gaps or amplify them. Tell us, what scenarios are you most concerned about, and how can New York prepare differently?
Yeah. I mean, when you see an immigration enforcement budget of 170 billion, 5 billion is more than...
Can you speak up a little?
Oh, sure. More than most European countries sort of like spent on their defense budget. I mean, there's a lot of reasons to be concerned. But in Murad's spirit, I'm still sticking with hopeful. First of all, there is increasingly indications that say Americans are concerned about the border, but they don't tolerate the inhumanity of many of the policies, the cruelty that is being implemented right now. And we see that everywhere in the country, that sort of like public opinion is shifting. Secondly, where a lot of the work that we did was initially federally funded, we are now across the country also seeing state and local governments reaching out and saying, in the absence of federal funding, we don't want problems in our immigrant communities. We need the immigrant communities to make our, societies work. So they are looking for programs. They are looking for ways of how to help. And what we find is that at the state government level and at the local government level, there is actually a willingness now to step up. For example, our organization works in Washington State and is building a comprehensive case management program for asylum seekers, just with state funding, and that allows us to continue the work. And I also would like to say that, this distinction between Democrat and Republican, right, doesn't always work. We have a flourishing program in Abilene, Texas, for example, where that community is really dependent also on immigrants for work. And that community is incredibly supportive of refugees and asylum seekers, and together with the local Chamber of Commerce is building these unusual coalitions to make sure that the community there is being protected. I do think, though, that as agencies, as coalitions, we really need to design the programs to help these state and local governments to figure out how to do this. And I think we will see over the next 3 years a complete different way of how support to immigrant communities is being organized, because as Murad said, how we've been doing it the last 30 years, that doesn't work. And waiting for the federal government to get their acts together for organizations like us is also not working.
You and I talked a little bit about how, because so much constituents here are immigrants, that there's a big political opportunity here, and part of the solution, mobilizing state and local governments. And I think, Murad, maybe you can speak to that a little bit. Can you elaborate? Talking about speaking to the governor.
Yeah, no, I had actually a conversation with the governor's office in New Jersey just last week about this particular issue. As an issue that actually is a way to mobilize political constituencies, as an issue that they should not there's a tendency to duck away right now, but I think we need to engage, but we need to engage with policy solutions. I think we need to help state and local government officials see how this can be done, and that means also go beyond the morality of the policies and really talk about the very pragmatic aspects of how this supports our economy, and how this is not a cost, but really an investment in the future of the state, of the city. But I should defer to Murad, because he is far more gifted in mobilizing constituencies than I am.
But that also speaks to what you were saying about, the data and everything showing that immigrants being here and the data, economically, everything is for the benefit. To that point, Murad, we talked about obviously resources being stretched thin. If federal pressure increases, what risks does that create for communities here? And what can city and state leaders do right now to blunt that impact?
Well, I think there's a role for every single person to start stepping up, right? How many people are part? Is this on? Yep. Okay. Can't hear myself. How many people are part of a local rapid response or local community-based organization? Okay, so that's I would say a fifth of the people in the room. So 4/5 of you are going to leave here tonight and see if there's something that you can actually do to help your neighbors. That's the easiest thing you could be doing. The second step is actually supporting the institutions in your communities that are doing this work. And then the third is actually trying to ensure that you're fighting for strengthening and hardening our city and our state. So at the city level, we currently have an interesting situation unfolding with our current mayor. And I don't have to share too much about it, but he, is trying to figure out his life, and God bless him. But what we need to be worried about is making sure that the city agencies do not illegally collude with immigration enforcement. It's not like they haven't done it. They have done it, and we believe are still doing so. So there are several different bills that can also support actually making the individuals who do it illegally accountable. So it's called the New York City Trust Act. You should look into it. If you Intro 210, if I'm wrong. So 214, too many numbers. So Intro 214, see if your council member's on the bill or not. We've already seen too many New York City families get harmed by errors from agency staff that continues to make the situation even worse. Imagine a mother who is trying to navigate New York City with her children, and ACS files a fraudulent claim against the mother that then somehow ends up in ICE's hands, and that person then ends up in detention. I'm not saying hypothetical, that has happened. Students protesting against the injustice that's happening in Gaza, were arrested erroneously and then ending up, when their charges get dropped, their names in the hands of ICE. That's not an error. That actually happened and continues to happen to this day. So students who are practicing, their right to protest here, and then ending up in ICE detention. Make it make sense. It doesn't. New York City has a lot of work to do, and we need to actually step up to do it quicker because we don't have the luxury of time anymore. At the state level, we need to demand that the state of New York pass the New York for All Act, which would prohibit localities and agencies and everyone in between of illegally colluding with ICE to harm their local residents without a judicial warrant. Pretty simple, right? In addition to that, we need to make sure that the state is investing in the Access to Representation Act, which pretty much says anyone who shows up to immigration court, if they can't afford an immigration lawyer, one will be afforded to them. You may have heard that somewhere else without the immigration piece in it. And it's our criminal justice system. If you can't afford a lawyer, one will be appointed to you. We sort of want the same system because what we do know is that you have a 10 times likely of a chance of winning your case in court if you have an immigration attorney versus when you don't. So those are, at the city level, really making sure that we're strengthening our public safety sanctuary policies. At the state level, actually legislating and having that bill passed would provide so much more protection to people, because what we're seeing happen, just look at our neighbors in Nassau County. You have the county executive who signed the 287G agreement. How many people know what a 287G agreement is? Okay, this is going to be for 93% of you who didn't raise your hand. A 287G agreement is pretty much an agreement that a local county or police agency will sign with the Department of Homeland Security to say that they will then become de facto federal immigration enforcement. And this is popping up everywhere across the state of New York. It's in Nassau County with the sheriff and local PD. It's happening in Rensselaer. Albany police are already working with them without the agreement. We see it happening in Broome and Niagara County. It is happening all around us, and that is how people are being also racially profiled by local PD, who then stop them for no reason and then wait 2 minutes for ICE to pull up to arrest these individuals, creating false seatbelt checks, and then seeing people going to work getting stopped because their seatbelt wasn't visibly shown, and it's Border Patrol who's doing the seatbelt check on them. I think Border Patrol should be doing something maybe not that in the streets, but these are the things that we could be doing right now that the city and the state of New York are failing at in this moment.
We have a lot of questions, but I want to take 5 minutes to, hopefully it was a great segue, to talking about beyond the challenges and scenarios, how immigrant communities are actually banding together, finding ways to act, resist, and lead, and where that hope that you all talked about is showing up. One thing that I remembered while you were talking, you and I had talked about collective stubbornness as a form of resistance, and I thought that was kind of a great one of the ways, and it'll come up in one of the questions. But yeah, would like to hear from you. Let's Omar a little bit to close on. Maybe just one example of where local action has actually made a difference and you see that hope.
Sure. I mean, this is a little bit weird, but it's interesting to me. I don't know if you've heard the phrase that a grand jury would indict a ham sandwich, right? It's like the idea that indictments are very easy for the government to they have to get them from a grand jury, but they're usually very easy for the government to get. The government has failed to get indictments in Los Angeles against various people who have been accused of interfering with ICE officers in various ways. And in D.C., our friend with the sandwich, like other folks as well, have, in some cases, repeatedly been brought, their cases have been brought before the grand jury, and they have. So I'm not suggesting that everyone try to get themselves on a federal grand jury, but it's an example of how I think there are so many ways in all of our daily lives, sometimes unexpectedly, where, you are, and because this enforcement is becoming so pervasive, where you have some way to make a difference, right? And I think in addition to the sort of more organized network type things that you heard about from Murad, like your kids, if you have them, go to a school. What's the school going to do if ICE, shows up? That's a question you can ask the principal, right? Like, what's your workplace going to do? Like, what's your church going to do? Just think about the spaces you're in, I think, in your life, and the ways that you can kind of try to get people sort of prepared to kind of act in the best, safest, most rights protective way if there's a knock on the door.
And same, Hans, for you, what gives you hope right now? And maybe also to start answering the first question, which is, other than donating money and protesting, what can we do to help?
So I think both Murad and Omar spoke about the importance of volunteering, and whether it's with the local IRC office, whether it is getting signatures for ACLU, joining the New York Immigration Coalition. I think there's really things that you can do, and where little acts sometimes make a huge difference. I mean, your story about the local forces made me think about another story that we recently experienced in Spokane, where the local faith-based community actually got really upset about what was happening to the immigrant community, mobilized together with the immigrant organizations, and it made the police chief basically issue a statement: we are not enforcing anything on behalf of ICE because we want our immigrants to feel safe in the community. That initiative came out of the faith-based communities. So I would say volunteer. I definitely would think that sort of like engaging with your elected representatives, no matter what the level, but in particular at the local and state level, is really important. And reach out to the immigrant communities as well, because there is a lot of support needed there as well, whether it is basic humanitarian assistance, whether it's support around some of the court processes as well. So there are many, many things that people can do other than giving money. And I think this point of getting into action yourself, not signing an online petition or transferring some money. I think this moment demands for personal responsibility and individual action. And I know that everyone in our environment can find something.
And Murad, if you had something to add too, what more on how people can show up in the room for the community?
Well, I think I want to answer the hope piece first, and I'm going to say this because it's kind of funny, but it's not. I have a 10-year-old son and a 6-year-old daughter, and I have serious conversations with my son just to get his perspective about like what he thinks the solutions are. And every single one of them, every challenge I present to him, he always has the simplest response that makes me feel like I have not really given much thought to the issue before speaking to him, but he always has very simple responses, right? And he had a conversation over the first 2 days of his new school, because it just started recently, about, what happens if ICE comes to your house with the other students? And the responses that he was telling me of the conversation that he had in his school, and this was not a facilitated conversation, by the way. These were kids having this conversation. So 5th graders talking about what happens if ICE shows up. And they all started to self-categorize of like, how do we protect our friends? And they said, if they show up to the school, they can't really come in, but what if they push through the security guard? And then what if, and then he was telling me this, and, he was like, we're not scared. And he kept telling me that. Like, I don't know if he's telling himself that to hype himself up to believe he's not scared, which I think he is. But it's adorable that the kids who should not be thinking about this are coming up with their own safety plans for their classmates. And I know that that in itself is heartbreaking, but it gives me enormous amount of pride that children are figuring out what their role is. So when people ask, like, what role can I take up in this moment? I tell people, look at what the kids are doing, right? Like, if the kids are standing up and ready to fight back for their classmates, their friends, and you're asking, well, I can give a few bucks, appreciate the few bucks, but what are you specifically doing to show up, to actually start demanding that we live and uphold the values of our democracy? And then to weave into this question, every simple act of dissent matters. Every single one. A phone call, a letter to your congressional member, showing up to an office, asking for a meeting with your local legislators. Every single form of you fighting back in this moment really does matter. And I know that sometimes when you hear people be like, volunteer, it really does go a long way. You can volunteer with us for a slew of ways and reasons. Go to our website, sign up, use your skills that you have. A lot of organizations need more human capacity just to make operations work, right? To help with signing people in at an event or helping people get screened, whatever it is. Step in to work that's going to be fulfilling for you, but also has meaning, and make sure that you're actually delivering for your neighbors, your family, your community. And yes, volunteering, donating, those are really important, but also taking action is equally important.
Several questions talking about mayoral elections, what could happen in a new mayor, any predictions around that?
This is a C3 conversation. I will be around after the panel if anyone's interested in my opinion. I just think that whatever it is that's happening right now, we need the city of New York to continue to be the city that unfortunately was a sanctuary city under Ed Koch, Rudy Giuliani, and I don't have to say anything else after that. So we just need to continue to be the city that we have always been, to fight for our people and making sure that we're able to continue to be a city of immigrants as we always have been.
Maybe, Omar, this one's for you. Do you think the Supreme Court will engage anything? What will prove too much?
A few things have already proven too much, at least in the sort of interim stay, shadow docket, whatever, like this quick thing that they're doing. But, spiriting people out of the country under the Alien Enemies Act without giving them a chance to go to court was too much for the court for now, right? There have been, I think, a few places where the court's put its foot down. There are probably going to be other places where the court, finds that things have gone too far. And I think, another example, birthright citizenship, right? I think very unlikely that the court is going to allow the administration to go forward with its attack on birthright citizenship. I think there are, unfortunately, so many things that the administration is doing that are so extreme and so illegal that there will be a number that the courts, that the Supreme Court, stops or doesn't allow to move forward.
A follow-up question to that, speaking specifically about people who are sent to foreign prisons and the discussion around third-party countries, what can we do about this and what will happen to those people?
Yeah, I don't know that I have there is a lot of litigation that's really, there's one case that's been going for a while. There's more litigation. We actually just joined a case in DC involving people who were sent to Ghana and then are going to be sent on to other countries if the administration has their way. I think, again, the legal claims will move forward. I think one of the interesting things, though, is that, in this Ghana case, the administration's position is, oh yeah, so these are folks who, by the U.S.'s own immigration system is determined that they can't be sent back to their countries of origin because that would subject them to, a likelihood of torture or persecution. The U.S., it's like common ground that it would be illegal for the U.S. to send them back to their countries of origin. And the U.S. said, no, instead we sent them to Ghana, and Ghana told us we wouldn't send them on anywhere, right? Literally within 24 hours of landing, they're being, sent on to other places. And the U.S. has told people before they get on the plane, oh no, you're going to end up where you're not supposed to be. And, you can see the legal problems with what they're doing, but like the interesting thing to me, one of the interesting things is that the government's position is, well, Ghana told us they wouldn't. This is all on Ghana. They've lied to us. We're not willing to actually try to do anything to get them to do what they said, which was not send people to torture. But the fact that the U.S. is sort of throwing its co-conspirator under the bus in this way, the fact that, they're willing to sort of make such a mockery of the system, I think, that's something that's not just a legal problem. It's a bigger problem. It's a foreign affairs problem. It's a problem with the way that we treat other countries in the world. And I think that sort of bringing some of that to bear will hopefully is actually a necessary part of trying to get at this third country removal issue.
No, I was triggered by the word mockery that Omar used, because in the week that the government sent a plane to South Sudan, a country where some of my colleagues were attacked just last year because of the very unsafe, secure circumstances, they also brought a plane of white Afrikaners to the country to basically resettle them here. And I think Omar is right? This is not a legal issue. This is a foreign affairs issue. This is a white nationalist agenda that is being implemented, and they're doing it by making a mockery of every established policy, principle, value that this country has tried to at least implement over decades, and I think it's just that's just gross.
Take a couple more questions. We have about 10 minutes left. Two kind of connected one. On an individual level, what actions can local communities take to push back against anti-immigrant sentiment and protect their residents? And related, how can they support and protect undocumented loved ones?
So we have this campaign called New York Proud. It's
Seen it everywhere on the subway.
It's a beautiful campaign highlighting and uplifting New Yorkers, and they all just happen to be immigrant New Yorkers. I think that people tend to forget that what has made New York is every wave of immigration. And for centuries, we've built the roads, the bridges, the skyscrapers, our local economy, the food economy. Every single thing that we all love about New York has been impacted by immigrants. And I think that we tend to forget that because we're constantly being inundated with like fake news and misinformation consistently and constantly enough, where even good and well-meaning individuals start believing some of it. So we have to, one, undo that within our own selves, but two, really making sure that when we're seeing this misinformation being put out there, that we're actually combating it. So how many people heard of the raid that happened in Cato, New York last week? Okay, so very few people have, and this is another part of the problem. So one of the largest workplace rage just happened in New York State, in Cato, New York, about 30 miles outside of Syracuse. And I'm saying in recent history, one of the largest of 68 people in a company who ICE and Border Patrol were not there for the people, allegedly. They were investigating, quote unquote, the company. So instead of arresting the owners, they arrested the workers, who were the vast majority were women and mothers. So the narrative that the Department of Homeland Security starts to spin, immediately realizing what they had done, is this is all about fraud. This is fraud, this is about trafficking, this is about this and that. The people that they took had nothing to do with fraud, had nothing to do with anything that they were allegedly investigating outside of just being women of color trying to earn a living for their families. So our job is to always push back against these narratives because we know that they're not true. And now we have 68 families that have been really harmed. We have dozens of children who don't have their mothers, some as young as several months old to as old as 8 years old. And these are people who are contributing back to their local communities. These are kids who were in school when their moms got taken, right? When they got dropped off at school, dropped off from the bus, from school to their home, there was no one home for them. So I think it's really important that when we are telling these stories, not only to challenge the misinformation, but to tell the whole story and really be able, it's okay, it happens, but be able to tell the entire story of the real impact of what we are seeing happen. And the rawness of it, as horrible as it is, needs to be told.
I guess I would add on to that, which is connected to another question, which was speaking about the role of media and what role they play during these times. I think that's kind of excellent that very few people had heard of this, not just both for immigrants and for the general public to be informed about what's going on. I think KFF released some polling a little recently, which said that half of all immigrants in this country don't feel like that they have enough information to actually even understand how immigration policies will impact their lives. So that's one role media does, but also the importance of being informed, right? Of actively following sources, news sources, like Documented. So you can know what's going on and be well informed and be able to then participate in all of the supporting grassroots organizations and being on the ground to help. We have just a couple of minutes, so I want to make sure we ask the question that I actually liked the most, which was, now obviously I can't find it. How do you keep up your spirits? #joy is resistance. Speaking of hope and all,
There's sometimes very little joy in the work because we're constantly going from one crisis to the next. But the little wins that we are able to get keep us powered and ready to go forward. And this work is heavy, right? So you always need to have an alternative venting system. And usually I'll call a friend or two. But what really brings me joy is my kids. And one day I hope to not work anymore and just be with them. But they are the ones who keep me grounded and keep me going, because the world that we're fighting for is not for us anymore. It's for the generations that are coming behind us and the ones that are yet to be born. And that's why this work is really critically important, because it determines the future of this country. The United States is an experiment. The democracy that we live in is an experiment. And I believe that we all in this room believe in that vision and the promise of this nation, which is why we're all here. If we weren't, we wouldn't be here. So I believe in the promise of this nation. I believe in the democracy that we're fighting for right now. And while it's not perfect, it's far from it. It is our job to make it as perfect as possible, not for ourselves, but the people coming behind us.
I guess there's a lot of, their joy, I think, is always the whatever the victories are that you can find, you know, to extract as much joy from them as you can. And there are every day. I mean, every day there are terrible things happening, and every day there are victories. And sometimes the balance, you know, doesn't play out in our favor if you net it all out. But there are victories, and it's important for us to celebrate each of them and to draw strength from them. And I guess I would say, like, in terms of hope, which is maybe not exactly the same thing, you know, I think about, like, both my parents grew up in countries where they did not think there was no prospect for democracy for decades, right? And in both of those cases, you know, my dad was from South Africa and left really sort of at the beginning of apartheid. It's a long, long stretch, right? A lot of work by a lot of people, a lot of things that looked way more hopeless than what we look at every day when, you know, in the kind of meta sense. And, you know, it's not like they came out into a perfect light, but, you know, they won, you know, in time for him to see it, right? I think, you know, there is a lot to be learned from our own immigrant communities, right? From what our own, you know, ourselves, our families have faced overseas, and, you know, and the progress they've managed to make, even in circumstances that are much more difficult than the ones we face today.
It's so hard to follow. Maybe Joy first. I play soccer every Sunday morning at 7:30, 7 aside, 14 guys, and we're all from different places in the world. And the sport sort of like unites us, and it's like a, you know, like the 1.5 hour a week that I don't necessarily think about work. But inspiration, I think, really comes from, you know, the many, many people that work for our organization across the country. People who often bring their own refugee or asylum seeker experience, but that are longer here, and that fear for their communities, that fear for their own situation. I mean, we've had staff arrested, but that show up every day, and that basically sort of like tell us, you know, like you gotta fight. I got a deeply moving email from one of our colleagues who was until 4 a.m. At night at Dallas airport to prevent a plane with Guatemalan children from departing, and who basically shared with me what they did and how they ultimately succeeded. And when you hear stories like that, you know that you have to just go for a week longer, a month longer, for however long it takes, you know, to get back to a place that Murad was so beautifully describing just now. So,
Thank you. And I'll just add, as an immigrant myself, I came here 12 years ago, and I remember how difficult it was to navigate and understand how to go about this country, even as someone who came with education, language, you know, work experience. So really, I think for me, every day, the work that we do, the messages that we get, you know, someone messages today, they lost their ID, and the first thing they did is message us, right? To be like, what can I do? You know, am I safe if I do this or X, Y, Z? People who, you know, the court hearings, again, helping them, the fear that they felt, oh, I'm not going to go, but then us explaining what would happen if you don't go and helping them navigate that. That every day, our chief of strategy here has an impact tracker. She makes us feel religiously every day, just going through and seeing every single individual that we have helped, right? Helping them in the smallest ways, even if it's, how do I get heating, you know, for my landlord to do that? Can my landlord call, can they call ICE on me? And just being able to see that every day, no matter how small it is, right? And encourage you all, again, the questions around supporting our neighbors, the just being there, just talking, just the smile, the word. There is, again, a lot of fear, but a lot of hope, a lot of solidarity, a lot of people who are actively looking for how do we support. So encourage you all to make sure you are involved in not just grassroots organizations, but your PTA, your schools, all of those. I want to thank you all for this incredible conversation. There's obviously so much more to say. Please stick around. They're all here, hopefully, for another 45 minutes. I think there's an open bar and pretzels. So we'll be here for more conversation. Thank you.